Every morning, the most powerful man in the world woke up and told himself something strange. Before commanding legions, before deciding the fate of nations, Marcus Aurelius would remind himself that today he would encounter the meddling, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the dishonest, the jealous, and the surly. The man who ruled Rome prepared himself for difficult people the way a general prepares for war. And here is the part most people miss. This was not pessimism, it was psychological armor. Marcus Aurelius had cracked a code that neuroscience would not validate for another 2,000 years. Welcome to the Stoic path, where ancient wisdom becomes modern warfare and the mind becomes your ultimate weapon. Today, I'm going to show you the exact framework Marcus Aurelius used to neutralize toxic people without losing his composure, his power, or his mind. This is not advice about setting boundaries or having difficult conversations. This is a tactical system for making yourself immune to the people who drain you, provoke you, and attempt to pull you into their chaos. By the end of this video, you will understand why the Stoics were feared, not pitied. And you will have the same psychological edge they did. To understand why this works, you need to understand who created it. Marcus Aurelius was not some comfortable philosopher writing from a library. He wrote his meditations in military camps, surrounded by plague, betrayal, and constant threat. His most trusted general declared himself emperor and tried to steal the throne. His co-ruler was an incompetent hedonist who preferred gladiator training to governing. His own son would grow up to become one of the worst tyrants in Roman history. Marcus Aurelius did not theorize about difficult people. He lived among them every single day of his reign. The first weapon in his framework is what I call the morning inoculation. In Meditations Book 2, Marcus writes that when you wake, you should tell yourself the people you deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. This sounds negative until you understand the mechanism. Modern psychology calls it defensive pessimism. By expecting difficult behavior before you encounter it, you remove its power to surprise you. The shock factor disappears because you have already processed it. Researchers at Stanford have demonstrated that this kind of cognitive reappraisal, thinking differently about a situation before it happens, actually changes how your brain processes threats at the neural level. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, shows reduced activation when you have already prepared for difficulty. Marcus knew this 2 millennia before the brain scans proved it. The second weapon is what Marcus called the judgment doctrine. In Meditations Book 4, he writes, "Choose not to be harmed, and you will not feel harmed. Do not feel harmed, and you have not been." This inverts the typical power dynamic. Most people believe external events dictate internal states. Someone insults you, and you feel insulted. Someone betrays you, and you feel betrayed. Marcus rejected this completely. The insult is just sound waves hitting your eardrums. The betrayal is just another person's action. Your suffering comes entirely from your interpretation. Epictetus, Marcus's philosophical teacher, made this visceral. He said, "Stand by a rock and insult it. What have you accomplished?" If someone responds to insult like a rock, what has the abuser gained? Modern research on psychological distancing confirms this. When you analyze negative experiences from outside yourself, as an observer rather than a victim, you experience less emotional reactivity, lower cardiovascular stress response, and reduced rumination. The brain literally calms down when you create distance between yourself and the provocation. The third weapon is the ignorance doctrine. Marcus writes that difficult people are like this because they cannot tell good from evil. They are following their nature, like a fig tree secreting juice. You would not rage at a fig tree for doing what fig trees do. You would not feel personally attacked. This reframe eliminates the personal grievance that fuels most interpersonal conflict. The toxic person is not targeting you specifically. They are simply running their programming on everyone they encounter. Understanding this creates what psychologists call an internal locus of control. Research shows that people with higher internal locus of control recover from stress faster. You experience the initial response, but you return to baseline more quickly because you recognize the source of your well-being is internal, not dependent on others behaving correctly. Now look at your own life. Think about the person who gets under your skin, the coworker who takes credit, the family member who criticizes, the friend who only calls when they need something. How much of your suffering comes from their behavior, and how much comes from your expectation that they should be different? Marcus would tell you that expecting a toxic person to suddenly become reasonable is like expecting winter to skip a year because you prefer summer. The framework is not about tolerating abuse. It is about recognizing that your reaction is the only variable you control. Their behavior is their problem. Your response is your domain. Here is what most people never understand. Your emotional reactions are being used against you every single day. Difficult people trigger your anger, so you make mistakes. They trigger your insecurity, so you overcompensate. They trigger your need for approval, so you compromise your standards. The Stoics saw this 2,000 years ago. They built a defense system. When you cannot be triggered, you cannot be manipulated. When you cannot be surprised, you cannot be defeated. When you do not need their approval, they have no leverage. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. He proved it when his general Avidius Cassius betrayed him. Marcus could have demanded brutal retaliation. Instead, he planned to forgive him. When Cassius was killed by his own soldiers, Marcus refused to even look at his severed head. He pardoned the traitor's entire family. He won by demonstrating that he operated on a level his enemy could never reach. The obstacle is the way. Now you know how to walk it. If this shifted something in how you see the difficult people in your life, subscribe. The Stoics left us a complete manual for psychological dominance. I will show you how to read it